All right, we're so glad to rejoin you again for another panel forum. And this time we're going to be talking about trends in musical theater. So we're very excited. I've kind of had to hold everybody at bay for this one because we're very excited about this. And we won't be able to cover, obviously, all of the trends that are happening right now, but we're going to hit on a few of them. And I'm looking forward to seeing what it is that you guys are going to bring to this. So, again, this is Tiffany Bear. This is Conrad Bear. You know me. This is Kristen Abels, and this is Justin Abels.
Apples.
Justin Abels. I will give you all their spellings this time, so you won't have to worry about it. Peter Gibbons will be here, but we're doing this early in the morning for theater people. We're doing this early in the mornings because we have so much going on right now at the theater.
It's
so
3 p.m.
Yeah, no, it isn't.
No.
So, yes, we have our Starbucks coffees, and there are donuts on the table, and so it's morning. So at any rate, and this time Nick couldn't be with us to film, but our dear friend Josh Munn. Josh, smile for the people. Josh is here to take care of filming for us. So, without much ado, I'm going to do each question separately this time so that you can watch one question at a time, make your notes, make comments, whatever, and then watch the next question, etc. I think it'll make it easier for you. It'll certainly make it easier for me to get it uploaded. So, we're going to plunge in right to the first question. This whole thing kind of came about several months ago. I was talking to Tiffany and Conrad, and we were talking about the vocalists in the show. And particularly, it seems that today celebrities who are cast often, because they want to make money, not the celebrities, the other people, they are often cast in roles, and so they have a certain style, and they change the score, they change the music that the composer has written. Now, in the old days, that used to be done very much with the composer there and saying, oh yes, that's great, do that, do that. But more and more it seems it's happening when the composer isn't there. So I'm wondering what you all think. If we start doing that to the music, are we going to eventually be changing lyrics? Are we going to be eventually changing books? What kind of moral obligation, from a Christian perspective, do we have to the original creators of a work too? Particularly the composers when we're talking about the melody line of songs and things like that. So, have at, people.
Yeah, wow. I was thinking about this morning, as I was getting ready this morning, as you do, as you're sitting in front doing your makeup, thinking about
Thinking about musical
deep
theater
things of life.
trends.
Yes, thinking about musical theater
Yes,
and all
because that
the
was
deep
the
questions of
assignment.
life. And I was thinking to myself, it's really interesting. I feel like I have not observed a ton of celebrities within shows changing melody lines and stuff as much as their own personal style being added to the character. If you grab a celebrity who's a pop singer and you put them in Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella.
Yes.
It's kind of accepted that they're not going to sing stylistically accurate. They're going to sing the way they sing in their concert. Do I personally love that trend? Not really. For the reason that, it works and it sells tickets, which is why it's done. I don't personally love it because I think that stylistic accuracy is really important, and we'll dive into that in a later question. But the nice thing is at least we're not dealing with I'm singing The Color Purple, but I'm going to rearrange the music completely. That you're not really so much dealing with. You may have one note or two notes that are allowed to be a riff or change, to kind of spice things up. But they're not completely rewriting music, which I think is really important. Because of the reason that when a writer writes a show or composes music, they labor over that so much. Every single note it's like birthing a child. It's that gestation period, and you're laboring over, okay, do I go up? Do I bring the note down? And everything that's chosen by a composer and by the writer of a show is written for a reason. The notes go up for a reason. The music is that way for a reason. And if you just take exactly what's on the page and listen to it, there's so much drama that you get as a character just from the way the music is written, whether it is operetta, musical theater, all of that. So I think that we do have a really big moral obligation to take into account the fact that the composer has poured their life into this music and this is the way they want it done. With that slight spice of creative liberty, it certainly is easier when you have composers that are living and are involved.
Yes.
You know, when
Yes.
you have like smaller regional theaters,
Yeah.
you don't have, you know, you're not
You're
gonna
not
call
gonna-
Steve in Sondheim on the phone and be like, hey Steve, can I change this note? But on Broadway, they certainly would. So that's kind of the plus of those larger houses, that they are having those composers involved. But yeah, I do think we need to be careful. I don't think it's respectful to change so much that it deviates from the original, you know, art form.
Right.
Just little flair here and there within reason is probably okay, but.
And one thing I want to add in, to hook this back into the history that we've already covered this semester, it used to be that the composers really composed maybe the score or the vocal lines and things, and then an arranger
Use an orchestrator.
or an
Yeah,
orchestrator
yeah,
would come in
everything else, yeah.
and would would orchestrate what the composer had written.
Yeah.
We've kind of gotten away from that, I think, in contemporary. Our composers are usually also the arrangers, and so that
Yeah.
there again, that's where I think it's important that we stick to what is being done.
I also think that it's interesting, as it's 2019, it's almost 2020, which is crazy, that we're seeing more and more in musical theater particularly, but also in pop singers, in just popular music nowadays, there's this push to sing higher and higher, and more specifically belt higher and higher.
Yep.
And so there are things in shows like Wicked where there are approved riffs or options up that will happen. And so there are singers who, as they come into the role of Elphaba, where they're adding something, but what's really cool is that we know that that's already been, as it should be
This is
anyway.
okay.
This is okay,
Been
and it's
approved.
already been signed off on by the team, by, I'm going to assume, Steve Schwartz,
yeah.
one would hope.
Mhm.
But that's been a growing trend since, all the way back to Ethel Merman, as like the original Beltress, coming in and doing, Anything Goes, doing Gypsy, things like that, and it building from there, how I think we've seen it turn from things like Rodgers and Hammerstein, or
Yep.
kind of that golden age classic soprano-y sound, to more of an alto belt, then into a mezzo belt, and now into like this screaming high soprano belt.
Mhm.
And that's just interesting.
And
Yeah.
that's just actually going to be another question too
Really?
that we're going
Okay.
to talk about.
Yeah, that goes
Yeah.
right
Yeah,
into
so
it, yeah.
we'll hold
Yeah.
hold that thought.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts though about this idea of fidelity to the original creators?
I have kind of a thought, maybe in two parts. I'm not sure I'll do both of them right now, but that kind of, I think, asks some questions, some overarching questions. So it's more of like, this is interesting to think about versus
Yes.
like this is an answer.
Oh, they like interesting
Yeah,
things
so
to think about.
I was thinking about, I studied some of the history of George Friedrich Handel. He wrote a lot of oratorios. You might be familiar with the Messiah. And he was a composer of German descent. So Germany, during World War II, loved to claim him as like, this is the pride of the German nation, okay? And so Hitler was in power, right? The Jewish people were being horribly treated at this time. And Hitler was doing everything in his power to show that, to try to demean them and to put them down. Most of Handel's works involve Jewish people.
Yes.
And so what they actually did, and this has a point, so hang in here with me. Just listen to the story. So what they did was they actually changed what they were like, they came in and said, well, Handel's intent was really to show the nobility of the German people and the strong spirit. And so he used things from the Bible to portray that, but that's not actually what he was saying. And you had highly respected, and we would look back today, like highly respected academicians that were like, okay, we'll go along with this. There were people that today we would respect and like, oh, they really know their stuff, and like music in colleges, things like that. And so I think it's an interesting question to say when you brought up the idea of moral obligation, I thought it was a really good way to phrase it, because I think one of the questions you ask is like, well, is this a moral issue? I think that's really interesting to think about, because we do care about it a lot, and like Tiffany said, it does come back to how much time the composer puts into something, or how much, and I think that valuing of authorial intent is really, I'm totally on the same page, but I think it raises a good question, is like, why does this matter? And then also, who controls it? So in that case, it was Hitler. It was his regime. It was a political control. Versus today, a director, if the composer's not alive, a director might control what he's saying. And, hopefully it's not something as immoral as that. but, I think that's an interesting question, is like, who's controlling it, and how much is a moral obligation or not? Or is it just an artistic choice? Like, where does that line?
Yeah, well, as someone who has written and composed, I've got several ideas in my head right now that I've been working on, but in today's climate, I'm somewhat reluctant to release them, simply because I want to make sure that they're always going to be performed from my worldview.
Yeah.
And we can't always do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Justin, anything?
Just kind of, well, actually go along with what you said, Mike. A lot of copyright holders for shows nowadays, like, I think a lot of companies, especially if you do like West Side Story on the East Coast, or if you're doing Fiddler on the Roof, and like some of these kind of like really great golden ages, some copyright requires you to perform it as it was staged and as it was sung on the page, and that's like an agreement. So I think there is even like, I think as a lot of copyright holders, there probably should be some moral obligation as well. And there's so many shows that they're like, yeah, do whatever, here's the licensing, here's the scores and stuff like that, but stage it as you will. And I know we'll talk about this a little later, but there are just some pieces, like, and I know West Side Story, what I did before I came out here, they're like, you have to, because I did it in New York, you have to do it with the same choreography, with the same staging, with the same licensing of the music we give you, even though the revival was a little different. This is the version that you're going to be doing, and you have to do the same thing when I did Fiddler. It's like, you cannot cut anything out of the weddings, the choreography out of the wedding dances. All the choreography has to be what was originally staged for this production. And there's a Yiddish production going on right now in New York that a couple of my friends are in. They got special permission to change. I mean, obviously they changed the whole language because it's in Yiddish, but like they were able to change staging. They were able to rearrange some stuff as is. And so, yeah, I think there's also a moral obligation to copyright holders to go, hey, this is a classic. We hold the rights to it. Do as is. Please do as is.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm going to drop this just by way of closing out this particular question. But as believers, I've been involved in different places, or have heard of different Christian organizations who will change the book, or will attempt to change the book if they don't like particular languages or things like that. And I also know of very prestigious Christian organizations who have been fined big time for doing that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we really have an obligation to honor the original creator, and then if we can't agree with that original creator, we need to leave that piece alone.
Yes.
We need to leave that piece
Agreed.
alone. So,
Yeah.
all right, that's the end of question number 1. We'll be right back.